Thanks for getting us food, man.
Hell yeah, man.
You know what? I know I've never been to the restaurant that you guys were at, but I bet you I know what one thing that wasn't on the menu in that restaurant.
And what would that be?
What two people need.
Oh.
Oh!
I thought you were going to do the thing again.
No, I didn't. And welcome back, everybody, to the best music podcast on this side of the Mississippi. It is called Hey Listen to This, and the two gentlemen that you are listening to right now are, well, I am the one. I am the only. I am the undisputed Ryan James Kearns.
And I am the one, the only, the often disputed Matthew James Dursing, and we're technically live in front of a studio audience for this episode.
Woo! And if this is your very first time tuning into this show, first of all, hey, welcome. Second of all, what we do here is essentially every week me and Matt take turns just picking an album that we're going to dissect track by track. And it could be a couple different reasons why we bring that album to the table. Like, we've done classic albums. We've done albums that we particularly like.
Yeah, and we've also done albums from the year that we're currently in. I think we've done, 3 or 4 albums that were released? I think 4. Because it was Pearl Jam, Taylor Swift, Charlie XCX, and Sabrina Carpenter.
One of those things is not like the other.
Very much not.
Both in rating and in style.
Exactly.
So, last week, what did we do last week, Matt?
Last week we talked about the most popular album by one Warren Zevon called Excitable Boy from 1978. The song that features the Halloween classic Werewolves of London. And we dived into that album, and I'm glad you liked it as much as I did. Well, not quite as much as I did, but I think you gave it an 8, I gave it a 9. Spoilers for anybody who was like, oh, I was going to listen to that. That's okay, you can listen to the rest of the episode anyway. But, yeah, no, it was a really good album.
Yeah, I was really taken back by, up until, before doing that episode, man, I only knew of Werewolves of London from Warren Zevon, and then for me to discover other songs off that album, if you guys want to know what songs I'm talking about, make sure you check out the episode. I was completely blown away, and, I gained a whole new appreciation for the artist himself after the episode.
Yeah, I'm glad you did. So, going from an artist you gain new appreciation for to an artist that you have been appreciating for the better part of the last 2 months. Today we are taking our final trip into the Jack White Multiverse. And Ryan, what do you have to close us out with?
So, the only thing we have left to cover is, Jack White himself as a solo artist. So, for those of you who have been keeping track or haven't been keeping track, the first album that we've covered in the Jack White sphere was the Raconteurs and Solos of the Lonely. Then we covered Dead Weather's Whorehound. Then we went over to the most popular Jack White project, The White Stripes with Elephant. And now, this week, we are going to be covering, which I think might be his most popular studio album to date, which is his first one, Blunderbuss, released in 2012. Yeah. And quick blurb about, Jack White transitioning out of the White Stripes and then going into, recording stuff for his solo career. Right around the time the White Stripes, released their last studio album, Icky Thump, they were doing touring, and then they had to call off touring because Meg White had, intense anxiety, so they had to call everything off, and then eventually the group, just broke everything off in 2011. And between, 2007 and 2011, Jack formed the Raconteurs, thanks to collaboration with a member of that group. And then, for those of you who have been, listening to every episode of this Jack White journey that me and Matt have been on, you will know that the Dead Weather came from a Raconteurs session. And then, specifically in June 2011, Jack White and his wife, Karen Olsen, They got divorced, and you know what I found interesting about that note, Matt?
What's that?
They had a divorce party. Yeah, like I wonder what that would actually look like in like all practicality. But yeah, and then essentially around this time, the reason why I mentioned the whole divorce aspect, it does influence a lot of the themes and just the songs themselves within a Blunderbuss. And, Blunderbuss itself produced at Third Man Records, a Third Man studio in Nashville, Tennessee. And Jack, basically got a whole, mix of, musicians to help him out with, the recording process. That being said, that I feel like that's a good, preamble to Blunderbuss by Jack White. Matt, do you have anything to add before we kick her off to the
Not
tracks?
really, except for the fact that this is not going to be the first time I've listened to this album, but it's going to be the first time I've listened to this album in many a moon, because back on our old WGEV days, this was one of the albums and one of the artists that you sort of hit me on to. I remember liking it back then, and granted, it's been probably a dozen years since I've truly listened to this album. But we will see if it's as good now as it was back then.
So, yeah, without any further ado, let's kick her off with the opening track, Missing Pieces. So, I'll take the lead on this one if you don't mind.
Go for it.
So, Missing Pieces. This was a great way for the album to start because it does blend, Jack's, usual, motif about doing, that whole blues rock kind of thing that he usually does, but incorporating elements of really unique lyrics, and just right off the gate you get a groove that gets locked in that's absolutely hypnotic. And the thing I love about that groove, it starts off as a simple lick on an instrument, and then layers on layers on layers, and I just absolutely love it. And even going further into how the song is composed, I love how the groove does build up to a point, and then the song eases the listener back in to the track before the vocals kick in. And one of the main things that drove me to appreciate this track here is just the imagery that Jack uses in the track on the lyrical front. So a lot of the lyrics center around from this notion about he's waking up and he's noticing that there is body parts that are missing. There's one specific line where he wakes up, he's just oh, I woke up and my legs were gone. He was talking about his arms were gone, and then he rolled over and he noticed that the clock was going, his alarm clock was going off, but he couldn't hear it because his ears were gone too. And the whole message behind that Jack was trying to drive home was when people leave your life and they say that they can't live without you, they really mean it. They'll take pieces of you and they'll walk away. And he was using that as a literal metaphor. And I absolutely love this track here for that. This track doesn't land in my top 3, but I love it nonetheless.
It is a great opener to this album, and I agree that it is not my top 3 either, but it is really good. Just a couple of notes on my end. The intro, like you mentioned, with that keyboard that sounds very fusion-y, sounds so good. And then it settles into that familiar groove that you sort of expect from a Jack White project. And the lyrics, like you mentioned, even though I think they're a little on the vibey side, again, it's Jack White, you kind of come to expect that. But the themes of, love lost or romantic paranoia or even sexual paranoia do persist throughout this track. So, again, I think it's a nice way to because granted, this is his first project by himself, after so many years with the White Stripes racking towards the Dead Weather, that, he could have gone the direction of, trying something completely wild and crazy, or, bringing back the same old stuff. And on this track, I think he does a little bit of both and seamlessly blends it in a certain way, with that fusion intro, with the lyrics being sort of a continuation of the themes that he had been talking about on Whorehound and Consolers of the Lonely. So yeah, I really do like this track as a starter. Again, the keyboard is great, the groove is great, and yeah, Jack sounds great too. So yeah, that's a solid opener.
Jack White, the original emo boy, talking about love and love lost.
He kind of is the original emo boy now that you mention it. You know, he had the black and red thing going on beforehand, and now he's doing this.
Maybe that's why I appreciate him so much.
Yeah. It's like he started out black and red, then Green Day stole it, then My Chemical Romance stole it, then Panic at the Disco might have stole it, so it was like, okay, I'm going to go blue now.
All right, so you ready to talk about the next track?
The next track is 16 Saltines. And boy alive, we go from a track that's sort of a new edition of Jack White to the Jack White that everybody comes to know and love. And what I mean by that is that this track is a heavy rocker. Like, that riff comes out, blasts you in the face, and does not stop for the entirety of its existence. It just, again, the guitar is so heavy, the drums are heavy, the bass is heavy, it rocks like hell in all the best ways. And even, again, the lyrics are, I would say, even more vibey than they are Missing Pieces, because, like with Missing Pieces, as you said, there was a theme there. Not quite as much here, but the way they're executed, especially on the chorus of that, you know, who's jealous of who, is so well executed. So, like, for those who are expecting sort of the typical in-your-face Jack White as Seven Nation Army would be, or Fell in Love with a Girl, this is the track for you. And at first listen, I was thinking, it's a little typical, and it's sort of, you know, what you expect, and the lyrics are kind of meh. And on second listen, I realized I didn't care about any of that, because this track is just so good. I have it at number 2 in my top 3 for this album.
So, before I go on, just for the listeners out there, do you have a top 2, a bottom 3, a top 3?
For me on this album, I have a top 3 and a bottom 1.
Okay. And can you guess what my structure is?
You have a top 3 and a bottom nothing.
Yeah, you know. Like out of most White Stripes.
Have you had a bottom anything for this entire run?
No, negative.
I didn't think so.
It's sacrilegious against me. But that being said, 16 Saltines. I loved researching the meaning behind the lyrics and the title of the track, 16 Saltines. You want to know how he got that title?
How to get that title?
So this came out of a story where he asked his daughter, "Hey, what do you want for a snack?" And she responded, "I want 16 saltines." And that's it. That's it. The rest of the lyrics are basically about a complicated relationship that White has had in the past. Another relationship, story for Jack White.
Yeah.
But that being said, not much else I want to really dive in terms of lyrical content, because there's really not much there. The only section that I want to highlight is more of a way that it sounds and a vocal delivery aspect. It's in the middle where he's delivering the lyrics, force fed, force mixed, till I drop dead. That lands just so that section lands so well on my ears. And speaking of landing so well on my ears, you mentioned the whole chorus of the hypnotic nature of who's jealous of who. I love the cyclical nature of that chorus. It adds such a nice touch, and that guitar riff, man, it's so tasty.
It really is.
I love how Jack uses the element of space and just the allowing that riff to fill the room in certain sections. Overall though, I love this song. It could have easily cracked my top 3, but I think it's because of there wasn't enough to take it over the edge compared to the other tracks in my top 3, but I like it nonetheless.
Yeah, it's a really, really good track, and again, just kind of one of those ones where you could just, as soon as it comes on the car, or, in your earbuds at work, or earbuds while you're jogging, you just crank it up to high heaven and just go absolutely insane.
I feel like I need to make a playlist of tracks that we all have mentioned in the history of the show where you can just drive, a good driving playlist.
It really would be nice. Also, one more thing to your point about, how Jack's talking about, a relationship issue on this particular song, and it feels like there's so many different ones that he's had. When is he going to come out with a side project called Maybe It's Me?
I think he might have with Fear of the Dawn.
That's fair. That's totally fair.
or Entering Heaven Alive. But I mean, that'll be years down the road before we cover those albums. So going on to the next track, Freedom at 21. So we have talked about 2 tracks for this one with 16 Saltines and Missing Pieces. 16 Saltines is basically Jack White to a T. Missing Pieces, it has the Jack White elements, but you can tell that he's trying something new. With this track here, he's trying something completely new for him. In production of the record here, apparently Jack had members of the Wu-Tang Clan come in. I think that's what I was able to research on, but you can tell the influence that had on this track here specifically, because that drum beat is almost kind of a hip-hop beat, and the way that Jack is delivering the lyrics on this track, it's almost like he's rapping bars. And I'm here for 10 times out of 10. And those bars that he's delivering, he's using such vivid imagery, depicting the struggles that he's having with this one woman who has complete control over him. And when we talk about control, he's the opening set of lyrics are basically talking about cut off the bottoms of my feet, make me walk on salt, and there's plenty enough examples of this painful relationship that he's in, that absolutely that I absolutely love just the imagery of. Again, the idea of walking on salt with your bottoms of your feet cut off is painful to anybody, but I love the use of the lyrics there. Guitar solo is solid. I love the lyrics, like I said. And another note I'm going to add about this song here specifically is if you earbud this track here, Jack flexes his production muscles where he pans one section where things are clearly in the left ear and clearly in the right ear, and for that and just for various other elements of this track, this song here lands in my top 3 at number 3.
Oddly enough, it does for me as well. It's also at number 3 in my top 3.
Same. Woo!
And the reasons I have very much right in tune with yours. I do love the hip-hop beat. The drummer on this track, Carla Azar, she does a phenomenal job of putting that down and laying it down and keeping it down. And the lyrics, like you say, they're a lot more focused on this track than they have been on either Missing Pieces or 16 Saltines. It definitely has that more story vibe that we heard from his time of the Raconteurs. But again, the groove is just right there, and it's the key to this whole song. Like you said, it's a hip-hop influence, and he would go on to do stuff like this. The first track that immediately comes to mind is Eosophobia from Fear of the Dawn, where he sort of comes up with the same thing. It's just a great track all around in that regard. And I can't really add much more than what you've already added, man. It is a strong track, both worthy of having it in the top 3.
I feel like it's also a very necessary track for the story of Jack White as an artist, because he's been kind of pigeonholed as this old school blues rock, garage rock kind of guy.
Yeah.
For him to come out with something like this, he kind of this is almost like a musical, F you to people who are oh, hey, you can only do one thing. Jack White's hold my beer.
Exactly. If he drinks, which who knows. And speaking of trying different things and something new, Love Interruption is the next track on this album, and we go from the fusion intro of Missing Pieces to the crunchy garage rock of 16 Saltines to the hip-hop influence Freedom at 21. Now we got basically a folk song, an acoustic folk song, where the vibes right out of the gate very much are similar to late 60s. The song that immediately came to mind was Dusty Springfield, Son of a Preacher Man. Sort of that very southern soul style, laid back. And this track is really, really good. The harmonies that Jack White has with the female vocalist on this track are really fantastic. The stripped down nature of it does sort of illuminate. You can just imagine like everybody just sitting on a bale of hay strumming on their particular instrument, even though one of those instruments is a keyboard. Don't think about too much. And the lyrics are the best on the album yet. They're a little screwed up, but at the same time, the way the lyrics describe this sort of all-consuming love, where this guy loves someone so much that he hates everyone and everything else that surrounds him that gets in the way of their love. It's really, really good. And maybe when I come back to this album in the future, I might have this in my top 3. But the one small complaint I'm going to make about this, and again, it's not so much that it ruined the track, but just enough to kick it out of my top 3. It felt like because they stripped it down so much, they forgot to balance it out, and the mix seems a little like everything to the front as far as the nature of the sound. So that was a small turn off, and again, not enough to make me be like, oh, this track sucks, but enough to be like, I'll prefer Freedom at 21 in the head. But honestly, this track is fantastic, and again, it's a nice change of pace, proving once again that Jack White is willing to go many different lengths in order to prove his musical palette as strong as it is.
So, I'm right there with you with the appreciation on this track here. If anything, maybe take it up to the next level or 3. So, I'll start with my my interpretation of the meaning behind the track here. So you were talking about how, for you, this track is about this person having this all-consuming love, and how this person this love is twisted themselves inside and out. I mean, with lyrics like "I want love to murder my own mother and take her off to somewhere like hell or up above." For me, the way that I walked away from this track, I focused in on the chorus and then dived out from there. So the chorus is I won't let love disrupt, corrupt, or interrupt me. This is Jack basically wanting to distancing himself from love and focusing on his own projects and his ambitions. And the lyrics about I want love to roll me over slowly, stick a knife inside me, and twist it all around. He wants that reminder that love can do awful things to him. That way he doesn't falter back on it. And for that to be the meaning that it is and the way that I walked away from it, it's such an impactful statement, and it's such a unique twist on what could be otherwise be hey, I'm just gonna give up on love. He takes that, twists it in his own fashion, and I absolutely love it for that. And outside of that, I mean, the vocals are really good. The other vocalist in that track, her name is Ruby Amanfu. Also, if I mispronounce that last name, I'm sorry. But if I got it right, nothing but net. But, yeah. The only other section that I'm just going to highlight here is there's one section where the instrumentation just kicks out and you just get the vocals, and I absolutely love that section. I can't say enough good things about this track here. It's pretty basic in its own right. However, the way that Jack constructed the lyrics in such a unique fashion, and while he's still embracing the influences and the performances as a whole, it's an easy favorite track off the album.
Number one with
a bullet.
All right. I hear you on that. Again, I'll have to give this another listen again, whether it be with maybe Under the Needle on vinyl, because I know I've listened to this album on vinyl at your house before. Also maybe through. Is Tidal still a thing? I don't know. But it's just sort of a more unvarnished way that might balance things out. Or maybe if they remaster this, which is certainly not out of the realm of possibility for any rock artist to ever do. But no, I'm right. I completely respect your position as this track being the best on the album. Not in my top 3, but very close. This would probably be my number 4 track, all things well told.
Okay. I can totally respect that. I'm very curious to see what your bottom track is.
We'll get there.
Yeah. I have a sneaking suspicion, but I'm going to save it. I'm going to save it.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
So the next track is Blunderbuss, the title track on the album. And we start to get into the section of the album where we get more of the piano-led tracks. And this track here specifically, it reminded me of another track we've discussed in the past. And that would be Simple Twist of Fate by Bob Dylan. Mm-hmm. With its feelings of cold loneliness about love gone wrong, or just how love, you expected it to go one way and then it went another way. And the lyrics and the imagery that Jack uses in this track here, especially talking about there's a section where he's talking about an ancient grand hotel of Parisian thread and ivory, and when your man will turn his head, I said you look at me, the whole composition of the story here, it's basically about forbidden love, kind of like a Romeo and Juliet kind of thing, where Jack almost steals away this girl. And there's just several examples of detailed imagery, and you can really follow the story around. I really do dig this track a whole lot. It doesn't do enough to kick it into my top 3, but I still love it, and I still love it by itself. And one section that I really, 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 really do love is that the section towards the end where the lyrics read, "So selfish them would be their cry, and who'd be brave to argue, doing what two people need is never on the menu."
I'm glad you were able to parse some deeper meaning from those lyrics, because my thoughts on the lyrics were probably that they were the most vibey, confused yet on the album. Not that they were bad. I want to put that out forward. That I didn't think these lyrics were bad. They were just they felt all over the place. But again, much like with a lot of Jack White stuff, that's not the main focal point, and it's about the groove. And the groove on this track is great. Country Jack White, so back on this particular track.
Yeah.
Not that it wasn't on the last track, but it feels a bit more country this time. Last one, you could say, okay, that was kind of folk, maybe a little soul. No, this is country Jack White. The steel guitar on this track is fantastic. The groove is really good. It didn't land in my top 3 either, mostly because of the confusing lyrics, and again, I didn't put it as high as my other 3. But yeah, no, this track it does a great job of continuating, we'll go with it, continuating the country nature that Love Interruption had before it. So it does sort of start feeling like there's a thematic connection to the songs one after another. Like you said, the piano's coming up, and the next few tracks are going to be based on that. But yeah, this track is really good.
So, you ready to talk about the next track here?
Yeah, the next track is Hypocritical Kiss. And once again, we have a very piano-driven song that once again features Jack talking about the romantic side of things and sort of his paranoia towards that. The lyrics are very focused on this track, I thought. The only major issue I had with this song is, once again, the mixing felt a little off. It really felt like that piano, as good as it is, the piano performance is very good. It's so far forward that it actually obscures the vocals. And this is the part where I have to put out this disclaimer. This, or any album that we listen to or talk about on Hey Listen to This, your speakers may vary, therefore your experience may vary. So, I listened to this through my television. I put the playlist on YouTube, just sat down, took notes, and that's how it was. If I had listened through earbuds, like you mentioned earlier with Freedom at 21, my thoughts on that track might be a little different. They're still pretty good, but it might be a little different. So, I'll throw that out there. But aside from that mix being a little meh, I thought this was a solid album track. Not really anywhere near my top 3, but not bad in any rate.
So this, you mentioned how, this is a solid album track. That's basically my thoughts and feelings about this track here. It's not a bottom track for me.
Right.
But in terms of, compared to the rest of the crop here, this is one of the tracks where it's just hi, I'm here.
I exist. I'm a track.
But notable things that I took away from Hypocritical Kiss here, Hypocritical Kiss here are just the way that the lyrics are structured, where, like, the first section's being told from the point of view of the guy, the second part is being told from the point of view of the girl. Piano is solid, like you said. And one section that I really do want to highlight here is the way that Jack delivers the vocals on this section in the lyrics read. And who the hell's impressed by you? I want the names of the people that we know that are falling for this. That section's pretty, like, pretty, like, you can feel, like, the sass behind that Jack White sass.
Oh, yeah.
But,
I'd like to speak to the manager of Garage Rock.
Yeah, pretty much. But overall, like, it's mainly just a vibes kind of track, but, like, there's not enough there that, I don't want to put it any further down on my album. Like, my ratings individually, a solid track in its own right.
It is a solid track. It's not one that's going to be offensive, but it's not one that's going to really, like, perk up your ears either. It exists, and, Godspeed.
Godspeed. So, speaking about existing in Godspeed, you ready to go off to the next track here?
Sure. So it's Weep Themselves to Sleep, and honestly, my notes on this track are very much the same as far as Hypocritical Kiss, with the only real difference being, a couple differences. First of all, the guitar solo on this track, really good. Pretty much a standard, but really good Jack White track. The lyrics on the chorus, I think, are very, very good, but it feels like on the verses, they seem a little on the forced side. Like, it feels like these just sort of, like, the lyrical equivalent of throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing if anything sticks on this track.
Yeah.
So I wasn't really, like, impressed with that. And once again, we have a situation where the piano track sounds good, but it's way too far out front, and it feels like it's dominating everything. And again, your speakers may vary, your experience may vary. But mine, it was just kind of like, it wasn't as bad as my first listen through of Dark Matter, where I literally could not hear Eddie Vedder for the life of me. Like, it was just sort of like, okay, I wish I could hear Jack more on the piano, maybe just a little less. But aside from all of that, I kind of have the same feelings about Weep Themselves to Sleep. The only difference being, A, what I just mentioned, and B, that it kind of feels like we're getting, especially starting with Blunderbuss, we're getting into sort of like a dream sequence type of succession of songs, where it feels like it's this sort of like vibey, very sort of, I wouldn't say meandering, but drifting state where, Jack has focused thoughts, but they're sort of lost in the sea of unfocusedness, if that makes any sense at all, which could very well be the point. But yeah, no, I think this track's okay. It's not anywhere near my top 3, but it's fine.
So, on initial listen for this episode here, like, I had the same kind of thoughts and feelings about Weep Themselves to Sleep. But after multiple, like, spins of the track here, like, I found enough for it to, like, stand out compared to, like, the previous track, Hypocritical Kiss. And I found that within the instrumentation itself. Like, I just love how, like, just a little moments within the track that make it stand out. Like, one moment that I'm going to highlight is just that piano lick that occurs in between sections, where it just almost seems like it's guiding the listener into the next section. And it's such a bare bones kind of moment, but like I love the use of that. And then the instrumental breaks that happen between sections are solid with, like, just the hits that when the band's coming together. And then, yeah, the guitar solo, like you mentioned, I wasn't too impressed by it, to be honest with you. Like, it's pretty glitchy, but it doesn't really take off. It's just mainly it kind of just simmers there, in my opinion. And yeah, other than that, I mean, lyrics are kind of just vibey in their own sense. The song's basically about Jack boasting on how strong he is to hurt his ex-lover, and then there's others who are so weak that they cry at night when, like, oh, hey, like, oh, she doesn't love me, or oh, she's so mean to me, like, I feel like that, again, in this track here, we're getting Jack White sass. I wish we could have, like, a like a sound cue for that.
Jack White Sassometer.
Yeah.
No, I two more thoughts about this track. Number one, I think maybe the reason the guitar solo stood out to me a little bit more was because of the dreamlike nature of the track.
Yeah.
And secondly, to that point about the dreaminess, is that it could be very simple as much as saying, Hypocritical Kiss, like that was just sort of a song in and of itself, but this song invoking the theme of sleep in its title, you kind of to have that dreamy piano, because piano's always been sort of seen as this dreamy instrument, so it kind of plays in there, and it's a simple, maybe basic metaphor, but it works. And yeah, I think it does sort of allow the guitar solo to stand out, just kind of like it did on the one Metallica track. I think it was The God That Failed is the one track that where it was like everything was kind of like sleepy, but the guitar solo was like, "Rah!" So
So, before we move on to Shaking, I have a question for you.
Go for it.
So, if people are listening to us right now on their podcasting platform of choice, and they really like what they are hearing from us, what is the best way that they can show support for what you and I do here?
The best way that they could support us is by listening to our episodes either on YouTube or Spotify or your podcasting platform of choice. You could also check us out on Facebook at Hey Listen to This, or by going to TT Hey Listen and Twitter. I'm not calling it the other thing because that man does not deserve it. Also, we are on Blue Sky or Threads?
Threads, not Blue Sky.
Threads, not Blue Sky.
We didn't get an invite for Blue Sky yet.
Okay, cool. And yeah, just check us out. Find an album that you may like, because we are on album number 50 this episode.
Oh, yeah, baby.
Oh. Yeah, so this is out. So out of 50, there might be something you like. And if there's nothing you like and you're like, hey, assholes, why don't you try something that I like? You can email us by going to our email, which is tthaylisten@gmail.com, and suggesting an episode, and doing it that way. And perhaps if you suggest something and you may be interested in this whole podcasting thing, you never know. We might even have you on. So yeah, check us out on social media, listen to the episodes, give it the highest rating that you can, tell a friend, and continue to support us if you already are.
So, moving on to the next track, I'm Shaking. And yeah, like, this is another fantastic track, man. Like, I love the performances. I love how Jack just leans into the various aspects of what he's doing in the track here. The background vocals here are absolutely fantastic. The guitar groove is fantastic. The guitar solo is fantastic. Like, everything's fantastic here. This is a very fantastic track for me. And just one of my favorite sections here is like when he's talking about Samson was a mighty good man, strongest in his day, and then the background vocals come in saying, then along came Delilah and clipped his wig, and then Jack comes back in saying and it looks like you took me the same old way, so I'm nervous. And the way he says I'm nervous, it's, again, Jack White sass to a T. Mm-hmm. But yeah, this is another, him exploring, a different kind of style, but it's, almost like a blues boogie rock kind of thing. And I'm absolutely here for a 10 times out of 10, and it completes my, top 3 in terms of, tracks, and this is number 2.
This is number 2 on your top 3.
Yeah.
It's fascinating that you say all those things. This is not my bottom track.
I was going to say, are you about to break my heart?
I am not about to break your heart. But I do have a couple of interesting notes based on what you said. Because as we have discussed in past radio formats, you are a fan of the band, the Black Keys.
Yes.
And as we discussed, I believe it was on the, I want to say it was the Raconteurs episode, where we discussed how Jack White himself is not a fan of the Black Keys. I found this track to be very fascinating because it sounds exactly like the Black Keys. It sounds like it would fit right in between with Lonely Boy and Gold on the Ceiling, or Never Gonna Give You Up, or Howlin' For You. This feels exactly like a Black Keys track. And that's not a bad thing. I like the Black Keys too. But I just heard that. I was like, okay, Jack, I see you. Hate the thing and then be the thing. All right, cool, fine. Aside from that, though, I agree. The phrasing on this track, it's a little stuttered and sort of weird, sort of like in that old blues style. The background vocals are very good. It didn't quite stand out to me as much as it did for you, but I respect your feelings on it because I feel like that's how I felt about 16 Saltines, where it's just like this really great, like, hell yeah, punch you in the face type of track. So I get where you're coming from. I would put this in the good song bucket, but I wouldn't put it in my top 3.
The music video for I'm Shaking is pretty fantastic as well. So for those of you who enjoyed that medium a little bit more, feel free to check it out. It's basically featuring Jack and his band, like, having two sides duel it out. Like, there's a dark side and there's a light side. But yeah, you ready to talk about Trash Tongue Talker? Trash Tongue Talker, yeah.
Yeah, Trash Tongue Talker. Yeah. This track is a bit of a switch back to the mode that we were in before I'm Shakin', which was very piano driven. Feels a bit more folkish on this track, but I will say this was another contender for my top 3 because I thought the lyrics on this track are fantastic. He sort of goes between saying, how the people in his life talk so much trash and he doesn't buy any of it. And then he just basically references a children's nursery rhyme. I mean, Two Little Monkeys, I think is the name of the nursery rhyme. I think this is a really tight song. The one thing that kept it out of the top 3 for me is basically he just did a 2-minute song for 4 minutes.
Yeah.
Which kind of was okay, so what exactly did you do from part A to part B that justified you doing this? Not so much I was like, this is bad now. But I was just kind of interesting. You just sort of repeated the song and maybe up the ante just a little bit. But I think this is a really good song.
Yeah. It's another, a very much like an album track for me. Again, solid in its own right. And I did appreciate the way that it was structured. I kind of, you mentioned how it's basically like a 2-minute song, but he, repeated himself. I took that as, him just embracing his blues influences, where he just, really didn't change up. He's like, hey, let's just run it back one more time. And the way that the song kicks off with the lyrics, I got no truck with your woman, always coming over when I ain't home. I love that old school blues kind of feel. And yeah, not much else that I can really add. Again, it's very much a vibes kind of track. The instrumental jam session is pretty solid. Love how the track mainly features the piano. It's an excellent touch. Anytime that Jack can really just step away from the guitar and try a different instrument, I'm always a fan of that. But yeah, I already revealed my top 3. I don't have a bottom anything, so yeah, it's a solid track for me, man.
Yeah, and I have not yet revealed my top or bottom track yet, and we got 4 songs to go.
Yeah, we're in the home stretch, baby. Let's go!
Let's go.
All right, so the next track is Hold on, words there. Eponymous, Poor Boy.
I was about to say you could just turn that to a Big Daddy reference and gotten away with it.
Yeah, there you go.
Hip Hop Anonymous. Damn you! You got the easy ones!
But this track here almost fell victim to a couple of the other. It could have fell victim in the sense of it could have became another very much a solid album track for me. But I think it was on the last listen of it where you can just really feel the groove that Jack is just enjoying in this track here. He's absolutely just having fun with it. And that just bumped it up just 1 point for me. But digging into the song itself, this is almost like a ragtime blues song that grooves really well. The piano's fantastic, for very much of the album here at this point. Instrumentation's great. I love the, where the piano and the vocals line up together. I feel like that's a really great moment. And yeah, really don't have much else to say other than that. I mean, the lyrics are pretty vibey, and the song is basically about Jack just giving up on changing another person. And yeah, it's just a good time, man.
I agree. It is a really good time. As far as my thoughts on the track, there were two bands that came to my mind as far as bands I thought of listening to this track. First one was the Raconteurs, because the vibes on this track are very like Medicine Show, and you look at the album art of Consoles and Lonely, and it was just sort of them sort of on the Oregon Trail, playing to the masses, whoever they may be. So I thought that sort of reminded me of that almost instantly. Another band I was kind of reminded of was the Kinks. Sort of a very sort of weird, eclectic, almost very tongue-in-cheek type of vibe, where, they know they're being like very old-timey and, like you say, ragtime, and they're just sort of having fun with it. And as far as the lyrics go, I agree with you that they're very vibey. But the one note I will make is that when I was looking at the lyrics for each of the tracks through Genius.com, the description of this track mentioned that it was a cryptic opus for Jack White. And I'm just like, what the hell are you talking about? There's nothing cryptic here except for the fact that it doesn't make any sense.
Those Genius editors, like, they try to, find a mountain in a molehill there.
Yeah. They make Pitchfork reviewers look like, K-pop stans.
Yeah. Like, I remember when we did...
No offense, by the way.
I know when we did our Pixies episode, like, every other track was just about, like, how, like, horny the Pixies are. And I'm like, maybe you guys are just horny editors.
Yeah, that could be very well it. It's like... Because, if we were to review, that one album by what was called The Money Store, and the only source of information we had was the Fantana review, we'd gush over it like crazy. But the editor is very strong when it comes to these things, and that's why we do this show, because we like to get our own thoughts out there.
So you ready to talk about the next track?
The next track is I Guess I Should Go to Sleep.
All right, good night, everybody.
Ba-da-ba-ba-da-ba. Please make sure to tip your waiters and try the lobster. No, this track is, once again, it almost feels like an answer track to Weep Themselves to Sleep, because on that track, Jack was basically saying, hey, the way I act, everybody else just wants to cry themselves to sleep. And here he's realizing, maybe I should just go to sleep because this is exhausting. The groove is very solid. I think it's a little on the jittery side, as are the vocals. I would even consider them unnerving. But again, the piano and the drums, very much on point. This is a very jazzy song in a sense. Almost like a twist on like a smooth jazz or like vibraphone or something like that from the Modern Jazz Quartet. This definitely falls into the album track category for me. Not something I hate on, not something I really like a whole lot either. It's solid.
I'm not going to really add too much else of what you already counted, touched on with this track. I am a lot higher on this track than you, though. Like, it could have cracked my top 3, to be honest with you. And it's just for the simplistic nature of it. And just the themes about, just giving up on the day and trying again tomorrow. I think we've all been there, late at night being like, well, today kind of sucked. Maybe I'll just go to bed.
Yeah. Because maybe I'll sleep the rest of this one out and try again tomorrow.
Yeah. And, outside of the lyrics, the instrumentation, like you mentioned, it is a very nice, groovy kind of track. The background vocals are solid. And I love that at the beginning, you get that count in. It was a very nice touch. And then the gentle fade out at the end is, again, fantastic. And I think I was just taken back by, the notion again about, just giving up on the day and just being like, okay, I guess it's time for bed. Because I feel like we've all been there. Exactly. But yeah, for me, this could have easily cracked my top 3. I did appreciate the hell out of it. But I'm ready to move on to On and On and On.
Before we get there, have you noticed something?
That you have not mentioned your bottom track yet.
Or
your top tracks. So we
have 2 tracks to go.
All right. So I'll let you know that the track that I thought was going to be your bottom track, we already covered.
Oh, really? Which one did you think that was?
Eponymous, Poor Boy.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I dug that track.
But now I have a theory
about which one is which.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I'll lead off On and On and On.
Okay.
So This is the penultimate track on the album here. Hey, I don't know why they say that's a joke or anything.
It's not even a joke, it's just a fact.
Yeah.
It's just fun saying the word penultimate. It makes it sound smarter.
Yeah. We are so smart. SMRT. But no. Here, it just seems like with On and On and On, this is Jack just really just laying back into like a smooth kind of groove. The chorus where it's just basically Jack being like on and on and on. It's hauntingly beautiful. The piano work is solid again. I did appreciate that. And just the third verse where the instrumentation goes out is a great touch for me. And yeah, the section where he's talking about the stones in the sky, they never worry. They don't have to worry. They move in their own way. But I have to choose what to do, how to act, what to think, how to talk, what to say. So, like, this is basically Jack just saying, like, hey, like, he sees, like, just how nature is and, like, how, like, certain aspects of it doesn't have to choose how to, like, think or choose how to, like, live their lives. But he's struggling with, like, hey, like, I have to choose how to act, how to think, how to talk, what to say. And I did appreciate the track a good bit. It didn't do enough to crack it into the contention of being like a top 3 song for me, but I did appreciate it nonetheless.
I appreciate this track too. This is my favorite song on the album. And for a lot of the reasons you touched on, I think the harmonies are phenomenal. This to me feels like a very solid, honestly, of all the country-ish tracks that I've heard Jack White do, this is probably my favorite easily. Just because it's so easygoing and smooth. The way that the drums have that sort of brushwork on them and sort of the dynamics on this track are so wonderful. Because on the verses, Jack, is very subtle and very subdued in a sense. And then that chorus just lifts off where it goes on and on and on. It just executed so perfectly. And like you say, when things sort of kick up in the bridge, where the vocals start to get a little bit on the tougher side, that was a nice touch. The outro on this track is very nice because it ramps things up without like going too crazy. And I've always loved this. Is the track I had to think because it was tough deciding between this or 16 Saltines or even Freedom at 21, which was my top one. And at the end of the day, I was like, when I think of this album, what's the track I'm going to come back to first? And it's this one, easily. So on and on and on, my number 1 track on the album.
I was wrong again, man. I thought On and On and On was going to be your bottom track.
Nope. No, it is not.
But ladies and gentlemen, we basically know what the bottom track is at this rate because there's only 1 track remaining.
There is 1 track left.
And that's Take Me With You When You Go.
Take Me With You When You Go. It is my least favorite track on the album.
And you kick it off.
I'll kick it off. And it's honestly not even a horrible track. Like, it's not unlistenable. But, again, especially coming off of the smooth, sophisticated, perfect execution of On and On and On, this track just goes all over the place. Like, it starts with sort of this almost half-assed version of Hippopotamus, Poor Boy, sort of that weird, like, jazzy, ragtimey feel. And then halfway through, it just sort of cuts off back into Jack White garage mode. And not only that, the vocals, again, your speakers may vary, your experience may vary. I thought the vocals were weird and not mixed very well. I thought this was all the rough tendencies of Jack White, sort of the stereotypical tendencies of Jack White coming out to play here. And just that, I have no idea what this song is trying to be. Like, it's 2 songs sort of not even combined into one. It's just sort of smashed together into one like some sort of twisted peanut butter and jelly sandwich. It just didn't do really anything good for me. So that's why it's my least favorite.
I can understand and respect that. This is one of the tracks that could have been in my top.
I am curious to hear why you think that.
It's just it wraps up a lot of the themes and like just the just the different aspects that were brought to the table here. I can understand it seems like in a lot of the albums and just music that we cover as a whole, you don't like whenever an artist doesn't blend tracks well together, styles I've actually caught it and it's actually affected my own
really?
standpoint of music, so kudos to you for affecting me like that in a positive way. So
I was going to say that the way you were talking was like, thank you for affecting my mindset. No, you don't have to worry about that.
No, it's helped me appreciate it's helped me appreciate when an artist does it to an artful degree, like a skillful degree. When we did the Adele episode, I didn't think that was a skillful use of that in that one specific track. But here, just there's just several moments where you can just really feel like the track is just wrapping up everything. The strings are good. I love just how the background vocals are solid. The change up at the end, whenever things just go into that ramp up at the end, I felt like that was a great touch, and especially those frantic vocals at the end. I think that was the moment that kind of sold me and really appreciating the hell out of this track. And yeah, overall, the rise at the end is fantastic. I mean, again, this was Jack writing grooves to an nth degree, but I can understand and totally respect on how you were like, meh, this kind of just seems like a hodgepodge kind of thing.
It did, but again, it's not a completely unlistenable hodgepodge. If you put this track up against half of Dark Matter, it probably clears it easily. But yeah, it just, again, it felt like I understand some albums having sort of the track when you were talking about sort of the end credits type of vibes here. I mean, we've talked about Untitled by The Cure, but this track doesn't even think it could be that in its sleep. But another track I was thinking of was the song The Show Must Go On from, I think that's what it's The Show Goes On or something like that. The final track off of the Rolling Stones, their Satanic Majesty Request, sort of like this weird, sort of quirky, goodbye, everybody, goodbye type of track, which I don't mind that on principle. It just didn't do it for me here.
But you know what does it for me?
The fact that we did it.
We did it, Joe!
We did it. We entered the blunderbuss and came out on the other side.
And we've officially traveled through the Jack White Multiverse.
Yes, and came out on the other side.
I am very, very excited, man.
I am too, man. This has been a journey.
Yeah. So I'll go first in my overall thoughts and feelings and ratings.
And before you say that, reminder to the listeners, Ryan has this album on vinyl, so the threshold is 8.
8. If it's lower than an 8, I sell it. So, yeah, it's been an absolute treat for me, discussing all the different projects and collaborations that Jack has done over his career and the various forms. And with this album here, you can really feel that Jack is really diving into several musical influences and just having fun with it. And that's just the main thing when it comes to music. If you're not having fun in your hobbies and what you're doing, what are you doing? And for Jack to be in this stage of his career, or after having so many albums with the White Stripes, the Raconteurs, and the Dead Weather, for him to embark on the solo career, because this is just his first studio album. He's released almost a half a dozen more after this, because after this you get Lazaretto, Boarding House Reach, Fear of the Dawn, Entering Heaven Alive, just to name a few. And then,
ironically enough, No Name.
Yeah, and Untitled, that was released this year. No Name, yeah. Thanks for the correction on that. But yeah, it just seems like when it comes to music and just all the different kind of aspects that Jack can bring to the table, he really does appreciate and does take it seriously. It's interesting that I'm gonna walk away from the Jack White Sphere experience not giving a single album a 10 because he's such an impactful, artist for me. But I think it's because like over the years, like music, like I've just grown accustomed to listening to Jack White stuff because like no track has been like a bottom track for me, but with the exception of one track that we've discussed in this journey, which that being Carolina Drama off of Consolers of the Lonely, like no track has really just blown my mind hole wide open. But with this track here, with this album here, Blunderbuss by Jack White, I'm feeling a strong 9.5 out of 10.
Ooh. I think that might be the first 9.5 we've ever given out on the show.
Yeah, almost perfect, but not quite there.
I'm not quite as high on this album as you, but I definitely did enjoy it a lot. And very much in the same vein of the other projects that we talked about, it's consistent, but at the same time, it's featuring a different facet of Jack White's musical palette. Again, most of the tracks on here are very good. I really did dig the country vibes across a lot of these tracks, and when Jack decides to rock out again, it's very well welcomed. Again, just the one dud at the end, but aside from that, pretty much consistent throughout. And definitely an album that I would probably place sort of on the higher end of the four we've talked about. I'd say I probably like this as much as Consolers of the Lonely, not quite as much as Element, a little bit more than Horror Hound. I'm going to give this an 8 out of 10.
8 out of 10. Oh, wow. Okay, what does that math to?
Let's see. 17.5. Divide that by 2.
8.75.
Thank you. 8.75 is our average because...
Math works!
Math does work. And by the way, before we get into our album recommendations, is there anything in the Jack White catalog that you would, like, not even thinking about, give a 10 out of 10 to?
I mean, a couple, like, Fear of the Dawn is quite excellent. And the album that he released this year, No Name, is quite excellent.
Oh, you put that up there too?
Yeah. But in terms of, like, his, band work, like, nothing in the White Stripes catalog, nothing within the Dead Weather, and nothing within the Raconteurs.
Gotcha.
Because I honestly believe that we've covered the heavy hitters out of those catalogs.
That's fair. So. Okay. So for next album recommendation, I'll go first on this one. As cliche as it is, and as much as I'm pretty sure I've recommended this album before, I'm just going to do it again because that album kicks ass. It's one that you just mentioned like 5 seconds ago. It is Fear of the Dawn. And I'm specifically recommending it this time around because A, it's another Jack White solo project, and B, it features a lot of improvements or at least variations or continuations on the stuff they did on this album. Whether we want to talk about the hip-hop influence from Freedom at 21, you can hear that on the likes of Eosophobia or What's the Trick or Heidi Ho.
Heidi Ho.
Yeah, that track. That fun little thing. And even the Heidi Ho is also an example of his sort of reflection on like old school music as well. The trio of tracks that open up that album are just pure kick-ass stuff, especially the title track. So if you like this one, you will definitely like Fear of the Dawn.
So I'm gonna recommend a Jack White album as well.
What?
Crazy! But it's an album that we haven't discussed at all in the history of the show, and that would be his next studio album, Lazaretto. It follows like a lot of the themes and just sonic textures that Jack explored in Blunderbuss, and also if you happen to own the vinyl of this record here, he had a lot of fun producing it. In that on the side B, you have to play it. You have to like actually manually pick it up and put it at the end, and it plays outward. And then, actually, I think that might be on the one of the sides of the album, and then on one of the tracks as well, depending on how the needle lands, you can either get an acoustic intro or an electric intro to an album, that side of the album.
You know what's funny is that the only other album I've heard of doing that, I want to say, was a Monty Python record where the grooves were like if you put the needle down on one thing, it was like a different set of tracks than the other. So I dig that a lot. So if you have not listened to either Lazaretto or Fear of the Dawn or anything that we've discussed in the Jack White Multiverse or any other dozens of albums that are in that multiverse, by all means, take a listen to it and check it out. So Ryan.
Yes, Matthew.
It is my turn.
Yes, I'm very excited to see what you have cooked up because this is like around the 1 year anniversary time.
It is the 1 year anniversary, or around that. I guess that was our official 1 year anniversary last time out.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, the two options I present before you, Mr. Kearns, are two debut albums of rock bands from the 1960s.
Ooh, okay.
And these are albums that are considered to be among the greatest of all time.
Ooh.
They are two albums that challenge the listener in ways that, even in 2024, may come across as unconventional, wild, and, in my mind, revolutionary. So I'm going to have you choose between two different foods.
I'm excited.
Your options are bananas or cream cheese.
I like cream cheese better.
I'm very glad you chose cream cheese. So the next album that we're going to talk about is the debut album from the Mothers of Invention, led by Frank Zappa, from 1966. It's called Freak Out, and I hope you're ready for a good time.
You know me, I'm always down for a good time.
Hell yeah.
All right, cool. So, yeah, ladies and gentlemen, if you've not heard that Frank Zappa album, Freak Out.
Yeah, by the Mothers of Invention.
But, okay, Freak Out by Mothers of Invention. I'm saying that out loud, that way I remember it later on as well.
If you have to text me later, don't worry.
No, it's all good. I got it now. Freak Out by Mothers of Invention. If you haven't listened to that album yet, make sure you check it out before next week's episode. That way, you guys can know what me and Matt are going to be talking about, and then you can experience what I'm about to experience for the first time too. Because I want to be honest with you, dude, I've never heard a Frank Zappa song in my life.
Oh, you're in for some stuff.
Yeah, so I'm absolutely ready for that. You have anything else you want to add before we send her on out here?
No, I just thank you once again for sending us into the Jack White Multiverse and letting us experience all these different albums, all these different parts of his career. And maybe down the line we'll be going into another multiverse of a musician. But we will see.
Oh, okay.
For now, time just simply goes on and 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 on.